The Making of a Saint, the classic second novel by Somerset Maugham. Part 3, 9. In the evening at 10, I went to the Palazzo Asti. The servant who let me in told me that Donna Giulia was at her father's, and he did not know when she would be back. I was intensely disappointed. I had been looking forward all day to seeing her, for the time in church had been so short. The servant looked at me as if expecting me to go away, and I hesitated. But then I had such a desire to see her that I told him I would wait. I was shown into the room I already knew so well, and I sat down in Giulia's chair. I rested my head on the cushions which had pressed against her beautiful hair, her cheek, and I inhaled the fragrance which they had left behind them. How long she was! Why did she not come? I thought of her sitting there. In my mind I saw the beautiful soft brown eyes, the red lips. Her mouth was exquisite, very delicately shaped, with wonderful curves. It was for such a mouth as hers that the simile of Cupid's bow had been invented. I heard a noise below, and I went to the door to listen. My heart beat violently. But alas, it was not she, and bitterly disappointed, I returned to the chair. I thought I had been waiting hours, and every hour seemed a day. Would she never come? At last, the door opened, and she came in. So beautiful. She gave me both her hands. "I am sorry you have had to wait," she said, "but I could not help it. I would wait 100 years to see you for an hour." She sat down, and I lay at her feet. "Tell me," she said, "all that has happened today." I did as she asked, and as I gave my story, her eyes sparkled and her cheeks flushed. I don't know what came over me. I felt a sensation of swooning, and at the same time I caught for breath, and I had a sudden impulse to take her in my arms and kiss her many times. "How lovely you are," I said, raising myself to her side. She did not answer, but looked at me, smiling. Her eyes glistened with tears. Her bosom heaved. "Giulia!" I put my arm round her and took her hands in mine. "Giulia, I love you!" She bent over to me and put forward her face, and then I took her in my arms and covered her mouth with kisses. Oh God! I was mad. I had never tasted such happiness before. Her beautiful mouth, it was so soft, so small. I gasped in the agony of my happiness. If I could only have died then. "Giulia! Giulia!" The cock crew, and the night seemed to fade away into greyness. The first light of dawn broke through the windows, and I pressed my love to my heart in one last kiss. "Not yet," she said. "I love you." I could not speak. I kissed her eyes, her cheeks, her breasts. "Don't go," she said. "My love!" At last I tore myself away, and as I gave her the last kiss of all, she whispered, "Come soon." And I replied, "Tonight." I walked through the grey streets of Forlì, wondering at my happiness. It was too great to realize. It seemed absurd that I, a poor commonplace man, should be chosen out for this ecstasy of bliss. I had been buffeted about the world, an exile, wandering here and there in search of a captain under whom to serve. I had had loves before, but common, grotesque things, not like this, pure and heavenly. With my other loves, I had often felt a certain ugliness about them. They had seemed sordid and vulgar, but this was so pure, so clean. She was so saintly and innocent. Oh, it was good. And I laughed at myself for thinking I was not in love with her. I had loved her always. When it began, I did not know, and I did not care. All that interested me now was to think of myself, loving and beloved. I was not worthy of her. She was so good, so kind, and I a poor, mean wretch. I felt her a goddess, and I could have knelt down and worshipped her. I walked through the streets of Forlì with swinging steps. I breathed in the morning air, and felt so strong and well and young. Everything was beautiful, all life. The grey walls enchanted me, the sombre carvings of the churches, the market women, gaily dressed, entering the town laden with baskets of many-coloured fruit. They gave me greeting, and I answered with a laughing heart. How kind they were! Indeed, my heart was so full of love that it welled over and covered everything and everybody, so that I felt a strange, hearty kindness to all around me. I loved mankind. 10. When I got home, I threw myself on my bed and enjoyed a delightful sleep, and when I awoke, felt cool and fresh and very happy. "What is the matter with you?" asked Matteo. "I am rather contented with myself," I said. "Then, if you want to make other people contented, you had better come with me to Donna Claudia." "The beautiful Claudia?" "The same." "But can we venture in the enemy's camp?" "That is exactly why I want you to come. The idea is to take no notice of the events of yesterday, and that we should all go about as if nothing had happened." "But Messer Piacentini will not be very glad to see us. He will be grinding his teeth and inwardly spitting fire, but he will take us to his arms and embrace us and try to make us believe he loves us with the most Christian affection." "Very well, come on." Donna Claudia, at all events, was delighted to see us, and she began making eyes and sighing, and putting her hand to her bosom in the most affecting manner. "Why have you not been to see me, Messer Filippo?" she asked. "Indeed, madam, I was afraid of being intrusive." "Ah," she said with a sweeping glance, "how could you be? No, there was another reason for your absence. Alas, I dared not face those lustrous eyes." She turned them full on me, and then turned them up, Madonna-wise, showing the whites. "Are they so cruel, do you think?" "They are too brilliant. How dangerous to the moth is the candle, and in this case the candle is twain. But they say the moth, as it flutters in the flame, enjoys a perfection of ecstasy." "Ah, but I'm a very sensible moth," I answered in a matter-of-fact tone, "and I'm afraid of burning my wings." "How prosaic," she murmured. "The muse," I said politely, "loses her force when you are present." She evidently did not quite understand what I meant, for there was a look of slight bewilderment in her eyes, and I was not surprised, for I had not myself the faintest notion of my meaning. Still, she saw it was a compliment. "Ah, you are very polite." We paused a moment, during which we both looked unutterable things at one another. Then she gave a deep sigh. "Why so sad, sweet lady?" I asked. "Messer Filippo," she answered, "I am an unhappy woman." She hit her breast with her hand. "You are too beautiful," I remarked gallantly. Ah, no, I am unhappy." I glanced at her husband, who was stalking grimly about the room, looking like a retired soldier with the gout, and I thought that to be in the society of such a person was enough to make anyone miserable. "You are right," she said, following my eyes. "It is my husband. He is so unsympathetic." I condoled with her. "He is so jealous of me, and as you know, I'm a pattern of virtue to folly." I had never heard her character so described, but of course I said, "To look at you would be enough to reassure the most violent of husbands." "Oh, I have temptation enough, I assure you," she answered quickly. "I can well believe that. But I'm as faithful to him as if I were old and ugly, and yet he is jealous." "We all have our crosses in this life," I remarked sententiously. "Heaven knows I have mine, but I have my consolations." So I supposed, and answered, "Oh, I pour out my soul in a series of sonnets." "A second Petrarch!" "My friends say some of them are not unworthy of that great name." "I can well believe it." Here relief came, and like the tired sentinel, I left the post of duty. I thought of my sweet Julia and wondered at her beauty and charm. It was all so much clearer and cleaner than the dross I saw around me. I came away for I was pining for solitude, and then I gave myself up to the exquisite dreams of my love. At last the time came. The long day had at last worn away, and the night, the friend of lovers, gave me leave to go to Julia. 11. I was so happy. The world went on, things happened in Forley, the rival parties agitated and met together and discussed. There was a general ferment, and to it all I was profoundly indifferent. What matter all the petty little affairs of life, I said. People work and struggle, plot, scheme, make money, lose it, conspire for place and honor. They have their ambitions and hopes. But what is it all beside love? I had entered into the excitement of politics in Forley. I was behind the veil and knew the intricacies, the ambitions, the emotions of the actors. But now I withdrew myself. What did I care about the prospects of Forley, whether taxes were put on or taken off, or whether A killed B or B killed A? It really seemed so unimportant. I looked upon them as puppets performing on a stage, and I could not treat their acts with seriousness. Julia, that was the great fact in life. Nothing mattered to me but Julia. When I thought of Julia, my heart was filled with ecstasy, and I spat with scorn on all the silly details of events. I would willingly have kept myself out of the stream which was carrying along the others, but I could not help knowing what happened. And it was indeed ridiculous. After the great scene at the palace, people had begun to take steps as if for big events. Cecco had sent a large sum of money to Florence for the Medici to take care of. Bartolomeo Moratini had made preparations. There were generally a stir and unrest. Girolamo was supposed to be going to take some step. People were prepared for everything. When they woke up in the morning, they asked if aught had taken place in the night, and Cecco wore a coat of mail. On the Count's side, people were asking what Cecco meant to do, whether the ovation he had received would encourage him to any violent step. All the world was agog for great events, and nothing happened. It reminded me of a mystery play in which, after great preparation of dialogue, some great stage effect is going to be produced, a saint is going to ascend to heaven, or a mountain is to open and the devil spring out. The spectators are sitting open-mouthed. The moment has come, everything is ready, the signal is given. The mob have already drawn their breath for a cry of astonishment, and something goes wrong, and nothing happens. The good Forlivesi could not understand it. They were looking for signs and miracles, and behold, they came not. Each day they said to themselves that this would be one to be remembered in the history of the town, that today Girolamo would surely leave his hesitations. But the day wore on quite calmly. Everyone took his dinner and supper as usual. The sun journeyed from east to west, as it had done on the previous day. The night came, and the worthy citizen went to his bed at his usual hour and slept in peace till the following sunrise. Nothing happened, and it seemed that nothing was going to happen. The troubled spirits gradually came to the conclusion that there was nothing to be troubled about, and the old quiet came over the town. There was no talk of new taxes, and the world wagged on. Cecco and Matteo and the Moratini resigned themselves to the fact that the sky was serene, and that they had better pursue their way without troubling their little heads about conspiracies and midnight daggers. Meanwhile, I laughed and admired their folly and my own wisdom. For I worried myself about none of these things. I lived in Julia, for Julia, by Julia. I had never enjoyed such happiness before. She was a little cold, perhaps, but I did not mind. I had passion that lived by its own flame, and I cared for nothing as long as she let me love her. And I argued with myself that it is an obvious thing that love is not the same on both sides. There is always one who loves and one who lets himself be loved. Perhaps it is a special decree of nature, for the man loves actively, caresses and is passionate, while the woman gives herself to him and is in his embrace like some sweet, helpless animal. I did not ask for such love as I gave. All I asked was that my love should let herself be loved. That was all I cared for. That was all I wanted. My love for Julia was wonderful even to me. I felt I had lost myself in her. I had given my whole being into her hand. Samson and Delilah. But this was no faithless Philistine. I would have given my honor into her keeping and felt it as sure as in my own. In my great love, I felt such devotion, such reverence, that sometimes I hardly dared touch her. It seemed to me I must kneel and worship at her feet. I learnt the great delight of abasing myself to the beloved. I could make myself so small and mean in my humility, but nothing satisfied my wish to show my abject slavery. Oh, Julia, Julia! But this inaction on the part of Girolamo Riario had the effect of persuading his subjects of his weakness. They had given over expecting reprisals on his part, and the only conclusion they could come to was that he dared do nothing against Cecco. It was inconceivable that he should leave unavenged the insults he had received, that he should bear without remark the signs of popularity which greeted Cecco, not only on the day of the council meeting, but since, every time he appeared in the streets. They began to despise their ruler as well as hate him, and they told one another stories of violent disputes in the palace between the Count and Caterina. Everyone knew the pride and passion which came to the Countess with her Sforza blood, and they felt sure that she would not patiently bear the insults which her husband did not seem to mind. For the fear of the people could not stop their sarcasms, and when any member of the household was seen, he was assailed with taunts and jeers. Caterina herself had to listen to scornful laughs as she passed by, and the town was ringing with a song about the Count. It was whispered that Girolamo's little son, Ottaviano, had been heard singing it in ignorance of its meaning, and had been nearly killed by his father in a passion of rage. Evil reports began to circulate about Caterina's virtue. It was supposed that she would not keep faithful to such a husband, and another song was made in praise of cuckoldry. The Orsi would not be persuaded that this calm was to be believed in. Cecco was assured that Girolamo must have some scheme on hand, and the quiet and silence seemed all the more ominous. The Count very rarely appeared in Forli, but one Saint's Day he went to the cathedral, and as he came back to the palace, passing through the piazza, saw Cecco. At the same moment, Cecco saw him, and stopped, uncertain what to do. The crowd suddenly became silent, and they stood still like statues petrified by a magic spell. What was going to happen? Girolamo himself hesitated a moment. A curious spasm crossed his face. Cecco made as if to walk on, pretending not to notice the Count. Matteo and I were dumbfounded, absolutely at a loss. Then the Count stepped forward and held out his hand. "Ah, my Cecco, how goes it?" He smiled and pressed warmly the hand which the Orsi gave him. Cecco was taken aback, pale as if the hand he held were the hand of death. "You have neglected me of late, dear friend," said the Count. "I have not been well, my lord." Girolamo linked his arm in Cecco's. "Come, come," he said. "You must not be angry because I used sharp words to you the other day. You know I am hot-tempered." "You have a right to say what you please." "Oh, no, I have only a right to say pleasant things." He smiled, but all the time the mobile eyes were shifting here and there, scrutinizing Cecco's face, giving occasional quick glances to me and Matteo. He went on, "You must show a forgiving spirit." Then to Matteo, "We must all be good Christians if we can, eh, Matteo?" "Of course. And yet your cousin bears malice." "No, my lord," said Cecco. "I'm afraid I was too outspoken." "Well, if you were, I have forgiven you. and you must forgive me. But we will not talk of that. My children have been asking for you. It is strange that this ferocious creature, who tells me I am the worst among bad men, should be so adored by my children. Your little godson is always crying for you." "Dear child," said Cecco, "come and see them now. There is no time like the present." Matteo and I looked at one another. Was all this an attempt to get him in his hand, and this time not to let him go? "I must pray you to excuse me, for I have some gentlemen coming to dine with me today, and I fear I shall be late already." Girolamo gave us a rapid look, and evidently saw in our eyes something of our thoughts, for he said good-humouredly, "You never will do anything for me, Cecco, but I won't keep you. I respect the duties of hospitality. However, another day you must come." He warmly pressed Cecco's hand, and nodding to Matteo and me, left us. The crowd had not been able to hear what was said, but they had seen the cordiality, and as soon as Girolamo disappeared behind the palace doors, broke out into murmurs of derision. The Christian sentiment clearly gained little belief from them, and they put down the Count's act to fear. It was clear, they said, that he found Cecco too strong for him and dared nothing. It was a discovery that the man they had so feared was willing to turn the other cheek when the one was smitten. And to all their former hate, they added a new hate that he had caused them terror without being terrible. They hated him now for their own pusillanimity. The mocking songs gained force, and Girolamo began to be known as Cornuto, the man of horns. Born on this wave of contempt came another incident which again showed the Count's weakness. On the Sunday following his meeting with Cecco, it was known that Girolamo meant to hear Mass at the church of San Stefano, and Jacopo Ronchi, commander of a troop, stationed himself with 2 other soldiers to await him. When the Count appeared, accompanied by his wife and children and his suite, Jacopo pressed forward and, throwing himself on his knees, presented a petition in which he asked for the arrears of pay of himself and his fellows. The Count took it without speaking and pursued his way. Then Jacopo took hold of his legs to stop him and said, "For heaven's sake, my lord, give me a hearing. I and these others have received nothing for months, and we are starving." "Let me go," said the Count. "Your claim shall be attended to. Do not dismiss me, my lord. I have presented 3 petitions before, and to none of them have you paid attention. Now I am getting desperate and can wait no longer. Look at my tattered clothes. Give me my money." "Let me go, I tell you," said Girolamo furiously, and he gave him a sweeping blow, so that the man fell on his back to the ground. "How dare you come and insult me here in the public place? By God, I cannot keep my patience much longer." He brought out these words with such violence of passion that it seemed as if in them exploded the anger which had been gathering up through this time of humiliation. Then, turning furiously on the people, he almost screamed, "Make way!" They dared not face his anger, and with white faces shrunk back, leaving a path for him and his party to walk through. 12. I looked at these events as I might have looked at a comedy of Plautus. It was very amusing, but perhaps a little vulgar. I was wrapped up in my own happiness, and I had forgotten Nemesis. One day, perhaps 2 months from my arrival in Forlì, I heard Cecco tell his cousin that a certain Giorgio dal Aste had returned. I paid no particular attention to the remark, but later, when I was alone with Matteo, it occurred to me that I had not heard before of this person. I did not know that Giulia had relations on her husband's side. I asked, "By the way, who is that Giorgio dal Aste of whom Cecco was speaking?" "A cousin of Donna Giulia's late husband." "I have never heard him spoken of before." "Haven't you? He enjoys quite a peculiar reputation as being the only lover that the virtuous Giulia has kept for more than 10 days. Another of your old wives' tales, Matteo. Nature intended you for a begging friar. I have often thought I have missed my vocation. With my brilliant gift for telling lies in a truthful manner, I should have made my way in the church to the highest dignities, whereas certain antiquated notions of honor having been instilled into me during my training as a soldier, my gifts are lost, with the result that when I tell the truth, people think I am lying. But this is solemn truth. All your stories are, I jeered. Ask anyone. This has been going on for years. When Julia was married by old Tommaso, whom she had never seen in her life before the betrothal, the first thing she did was to fall in love with Giorgio. He fell in love with her, but being a fairly honest sort of man, he had some scruples about committing adultery with his cousin's wife, especially as he lived on his cousin's money. However, when a woman is vicious, a man's scruples soon go to the devil. If Adam couldn't refuse the apple, you can't expect us poor fallen creatures to do so either. The result was that Joseph did not run away from Potiphar's wife so fast as to prevent her from catching him. How biblical you are. Yes, answered Matteo. I'm making love to a parson's mistress, and I am cultivating the style which I find she is used to. But however, Giorgio, being youthful, after a short while, began to have prickings of conscience and went away from Forlì. Julia was heartbroken, and her grief was so great that she must have half the town to console her. Then Giorgio's conscience calmed down, and he came back, and Julia threw over all her lovers. I don't believe a single word you say. On my honor, it's true. On the face of it, the story is false. If she really loves him, why do they not keep together now that there is no hindrance? Because Julia has the heart of a strumpet and can't be faithful to any one man. She's very fond of him, but they quarrel, and she takes a sudden fancy for somebody else, and for a while they won't see one another. But there seems some magical charm between them, for sooner or later they always come back to one another. I believe, if they were at the ends of the world, eventually they would be drawn together, even if they struggled with all their might against it. And I promise you, Giorgio has struggled. He tries to part with her for good and all, and each time they separate, he vows it shall be forever. But there is an invisible chain, and it always brings him back. I stood looking at him in silence. Strange, horrible thoughts passed through my head, and I could not drive them away. I tried to speak quite calmly. And how is it when they are together? All sunshine and storm, but as time goes on, the storm gets longer and blacker, and then Giorgio goes away. But good God, man, how do you know? I cried in agony. He shrugged his shoulders. They quarrel? I asked. Furiously. He feels himself imprisoned against his will, with the door open to escape, but not the strength to do it. And she is angry that he should love her thus, trying not to love her. It rather seems to me that it explains her own excesses. Her other loves are partly to show him how much she is loved, and to persuade herself that she is lovable. I did not believe it. Oh no, I swear I did not believe it. Yet I was frightened, horribly frightened. But I would not believe a single word of it. Listen, Matteo, I said. You believe badly of Julia, but you do not know her. I swear to you that she is good and pure, whatever she may have been in the past, and I do not believe a word of these scandals. I am sure that now she is as true and faithful as she is beautiful. Matteo looked at me for a moment. Are you her lover? He asked. Yes. Matteo opened his mouth as if about to speak, then stopped, and after a moment's hesitation turned away. That evening, I went to Julia. I found her lying full length on a divan, her head sunken in soft cushions. She was immersed in reverie. I wondered whether she was thinking of me, and I went up to her silently, and bending over her, lightly kissed her lips. She gave a cry, and a frown darkened her eyes. You frightened me. I am sorry. I answered humbly. I wanted to surprise you. She did not answer, but raised her eyebrows, slightly shrugging her shoulders. I wondered whether something had arisen to vex her. I knew she had a quick temper, but I did not mind it. A cross word was so soon followed by a look of repentance and a word of love. I passed my hand over her beautiful soft hair. The frown came again, and she turned her head away. "Julia," I said, "what is it?" I took her hand. She withdrew it immediately. "Nothing," she answered. "Why do you turn away from me and withdraw your hand?" "Why should I not turn away from you and withdraw my hand? Don't you love me, Julia?" She gave a sigh and pretended to look bored. I looked at her, pained at heart and wondering. "Julia, my dear, tell me what it is. You are making me very unhappy." "Oh, don't I tell you, nothing, nothing, nothing. Why are you cross?" I put my face to hers and my arms round her neck. She disengaged herself impatiently. "You refuse my kisses, Julia." She made another gesture of annoyance. "Julia, don't you love me?" My heart was beginning to sink, and I remembered what I had heard from Matteo. Oh God, could it be true? "Yes, of course I love you, but sometimes I must be left in peace. You have only to say the word, and I will go away altogether." "I don't want you to do that, but we shall like one another much better if we don't see too much of one another. When one is in love, really and truly, one does not think of such wise precautions. And you are here so often that I am afraid of my good name." "You need have no fear about your character," I answered bitterly. "One more scandal will not make much difference." "You need not insult me." I could not be angry with her. I loved her too much, and the words I had said hurt me 10 times more than they hurt her. I fell on my knees by her side and took hold of her arms. "Oh, Julia, Julia, forgive me. I don't mean to say anything to wound you, but for God's sake, don't be so cold. I love you, I love you. Be good to me." "I think I have been good to you. After all, it is not such a very grave matter. I have not taken things more seriously than you." "What do you mean?" I cried, aghast. She shrugged her shoulders. "I suppose you found me a pretty woman and thought you could occupy a few spare moments with a pleasant amour. You can hardly have expected me to be influenced by sentiments very different from your own." "You mean you do not love me?" "I love you as much as you love me. I don't suppose either you are Lancelot or I Guinevere." I still knelt at her side in silence, and my head felt as if the vessels in it were bursting. "You know," she went on quite calmly, "one cannot love forever." "But I love you, Julia. I love you with all my heart and soul. I have had loves picked up for the opportunity's sake or for pure idleness, but my love for you is different. I swear to you it is a matter of my whole life. That has been said to me so often. I was beginning to be overwhelmed. But do you mean that it is all finished? Do you mean that you won't have anything more to do with me?" "No, I don't say I won't have anything more to do with you. But love? It is love I want." She shrugged her shoulders. "But why not?" I said despairingly. "Why have you given it me at all if you want to take it away? One is not master of one's love. It comes and goes. Don't you love me at all?" "No!" "Oh, God, but why do you tell me this today?" "I had to tell you some time." "But why not yesterday, or the day before? Why today particularly?" She did not answer. "Is it because Giorgio dal Aste has just returned?" She started up, and her eyes flashed. "What have they been telling you about him? Has he been here today? Were you thinking of him when I came? Were you languorous from his embraces? How dare you? The only lover to whom you have been faithful, more or less. You vowed you did not believe the scandals about me, and now when I refuse you the smallest thing, you are ready to believe every word. What a love is this! I thought I had heard you talk so often of boundless confidence. I believe every word I've heard against you. I believe you are a harlot. She had raised herself from her couch, and we were standing face to face. Do you want money? Look, I have as good money as another. I will pay you for your love. Here, take it. I took gold pieces from my pocket and flung them at her feet. Ah, she cried in indignation. You cur! Go! Go! She pointed to the door. Then I felt a sudden revulsion. I fell on my knees and seized her hands. Oh, forgive me, Julia. I don't know what I am saying. I am mad. But don't rob me of your love. It is the only thing I have to live for. For God's sake, forgive me. Oh, Julia, I love you. I love you. I can't live without you. The tears broke from my eyes. I could not stop them. Leave me. Leave me. I was ashamed of my abjectness. I rose up indignant. Oh, you are quite heartless. You have no right to treat me so. You are not obliged to give me your love, but when once you have given it, you cannot take it away. No one has the right to make another unhappy as you make me. You are a bad, evil woman. I hate you. I stood over her with clenched fists. She shrank back, afraid. Don't be frightened, I said. I won't touch you. I hate you too much. Then I turned to the crucifix and lifted my hands. Oh, God, I pray you, let this woman be treated as she has treated me. And to her, I hope to God you are as unhappy as I am, and I hope the unhappiness will come soon, you harlot. I left her, and in my rage slammed the door so that the lock shattered behind me. 13. I walked through the streets like a man who has received sentence of death. My brain was whirling, and sometimes I stopped and pressed my head with both hands to relieve the insupportable pressure. I could not realize what had happened. I only knew it was terrible. I felt as if I were going mad. I could have killed myself. At last, getting home, I threw myself on my bed and tried to gather myself together. I cried out against that woman. I wished I had my fingers curling round her soft white throat, that I could strangle the life out of her. Oh, I hated her. At last I fell asleep, and in that sweet forgetfulness enjoyed a little peace. When I woke, I lay still for a moment without remembering what had happened. Then suddenly it came back to me, and the blood flushed to my face as I thought of how I had humiliated myself to her. She must be as hard as stone, I said to myself, to see my misery and not take pity on me. She saw my tears and was not moved one jot. All the time I had been praying and beseeching, she had been as calm as a marble figure. She must have seen my agony and the passion of my love, and yet she was absolutely, absolutely indifferent. Oh, I despised her. I had known even when I adored her madly that it was only my love which gave her the qualities I worshipped. I had seen she was ignorant and foolish and commonplace and vicious, but I did not care as long as I loved her and could have her love in return. But when I thought of her so horribly heartless, so uncaring to my unhappiness, I did more than hate her. I utterly despised her. I despised myself for having loved her. I despised myself for loving her still. I got up and went about my day's duties, trying to forget myself in their performance. But still, I brooded over my misery, and in my heart I cursed the woman. It was Nemesis, always Nemesis. In my folly, I had forgotten her, and yet I should have remembered that through my life all happiness had been followed by all misery. I had tried to ward off the evil by sacrifice. I had rejoiced at the harm which befell me. But the very rejoicing seemed to render the hurt of no avail, and with the inevitableness of fate, Nemesis had come and thrown me back into the old unhappiness. But of late, I had forgotten. What was Nemesis to me now when I thought my happiness so great that it could not help but last. It was so robust and strong that I never thought of its cessation. I did not even think the gods were good to me at last. I had forgotten the gods. I thought of nothing but love and Julia. Matteo came asking me to go to the palace with him and Cecco at the particular desire of Girolamo, who wished to show them the progress of the decorations. I would not go. I wanted to be alone and think. But my thoughts maddened me. Over and over again I repeated every word of the terrible quarrel, and more than ever I was filled with horror for her cold cruelty. What right have these people to make us unhappy? Is there not enough misery in the world already? Oh, it is brutal. I could not bear myself. I regretted that I had not gone to the palace. I detested this solitude. The hours passed like years, and as my brain grew tired, I sank into a state of sodden, passive misery. At last they came back, and Matteo told me what had happened. I tried to listen, to forget myself. It appeared that the Count had been extremely cordial. After talking to them of his house and showing the beautiful things he had collected to furnish it with, he took them to Caterina's apartments, where they found the Countess surrounded by her children. She had been very charming and gracious, even deigning to compliment Matteo on his gallantry. How it interested me to know all this! The children had run to Cecco as soon as they saw him, dragging him into their game. The others looked on while the Orsi played good-humouredly with the little boys, and Girolamo, laying his hand on Cecco's shoulder, had remarked, "You see, dear friend, the children are determined that there should not be enmity between us, and when the little ones love you so dearly, can you think that I should hate you?" And when they left, he had accompanied them to the gates and been quite affectionate in his farewell. At last the night came, and I could shut myself up in my room. I thought with a bitter smile that it was the hour at which I was used to go to Julia. And now I should never go to Julia again. My unhappiness was too great for wrath. I felt too utterly miserable to think of my grievances or of my contempt. I only felt broken-hearted. I could not keep the tears back, and burying my face in the pillows, I cried my heart out. It was years and years since I had wept, not since I was quite a boy, but this blow had taken from me all manliness, and I gave myself over to my grief, passionately, shamelessly. I did not care that I was weak. I had no respect for myself, or care for myself. The sobs came, one on the heels of another like waves, and the pain, as they tore my chest, relieved the anguish of my mind. Exhaustion came at last, and with it sleep. But I knew I could not hide the change in me, and Matteo soon noticed it. "What is the matter with you, Filippo?" he asked. I blushed and hesitated. "Nothing," I answered at last. "I thought you were unhappy." Our eyes met, but I could not stand his inquiring glance, and looked down. He came to me, and sitting on the arm of my chair, put his hand on my shoulder and said affectionately, "We're friends, aren't we, Filippo?" "Yes," I answered, smiling and taking his hand. "Won't you trust me?" After a pause, I answered, "I should so much like to." I felt as if indeed it would relieve me to be able to confide in somebody. I wanted sympathy so badly. He passed his hand gently over my hair. I hesitated a little, but I couldn't help myself, and I told him the whole story from beginning to end. "Poverino," he said when I had finished. Then, clenching his teeth, "She is a beast, that woman." I ought to have taken your warning, Matteo, but I was a fool. "Whoever does take warning," he answered, shrugging his shoulders. "How could you be expected to believe me?" "But I believe you now. I am horrified when I think of her vice and cruelty. Ah, well, it is over now." "Quite. I hate her and despise her. Oh, I wish I could get her face to face and tell her what I think of her." I thought my talk with Matteo had relieved me. I thought the worst was over. But at night, melancholy came on me stronger than ever. and I groaned as I threw myself on my bed. I felt so terribly alone in the world. I had no relation but a half-brother, a boy of 12, whom I had hardly seen. And as I wandered through the land, an exile, I had been continually assailed by the hateful demon of loneliness. And sometimes in my solitude, I had felt that I could kill myself. But when I found I was in love with Julia, I cried aloud with joy. I threw everything to the winds, gathering myself up for the supreme effort of passion. All the storm and stress were past. I was no longer alone, for I had someone to whom I could give my love. I was like the ship that arrives in the harbor and reefs her sails and clears her deck, settling down in the quietness of the waters. And now all was over. Oh God, to think that my hopes should be shattered in so short a time, that the ship should be so soon tossed about in the storm, and the stars hidden by the clouds. And the past delight made the present darkness all the more bitter. I groaned. In my misery, I uttered a prayer to God to help me. I could not think I should live henceforth. How could I go on existing with this aching void in my heart? I could not spend days and weeks and years always with this despair. It was too terrible to last. My reason told me that time would remedy it, but time was so long, and what misery must I go through before the wound was healed? And as I thought of what I had lost, my agony grew more unbearable. It grew vivid, and I felt Julia in my arms. I panted as I pressed my lips against hers, and I said to her, "How could you?" I buried my face in my hands so as better to enjoy my dream. I smelt the perfume of her breath. I felt on my face the light touch of her hair, but it would not last. I tried to seize the image and hold it back, but it vanished and left me broken-hearted. I knew I did not hate her. I had pretended to, but the words came from the mouth. In my heart, I loved her still, more passionately than ever. What did I care if she was heartless and cruel and faithless and vicious? It was nothing to me as long as I could hold her in my arms and cover her with kisses. I did despise her. I knew her for what she was, but still I loved her insanely. Oh, if she would only come back to me. I would willingly forget everything and forgive her. Nay, I would ask her forgiveness and grovel before her if she would only let me enjoy her love again. I would go back to her and fall on my knees and pray her to be merciful. Why should I suppose she had changed in the few days? I knew she would treat me with the same indifference, and only feel a wondering contempt that I should so abase myself. It came like a blow in the face, the thought of her cold cruelty and her calmness. No, I vowed I would never subject myself to that again. I felt myself blush at the remembrance of the humiliation. But perhaps she was sorry for what she had done. I knew her pride would prevent her from coming or sending to me, and should I give her no opportunity? Perhaps if we saw one another for a few moments, everything might be arranged, and I might be happy again. An immense feeling of hope filled me. I thought I must be right in my idea. She could not be so heartless as to have no regret. How willingly I would take her back. My heart leaped. But I dared not go to her house. I knew I should find her on the morrow at her father's, who was going to give a banquet to some friends. I would speak to her there casually, as if we were ordinary acquaintances. And then, at the first sign of yielding on her part, even if I saw but a tinge of regret in her eyes, I would burst out. I was happy in my plan, and I went to sleep with the name of Julia on my lips and her image in my heart.